We are. Okay, we are live on Minvo. So,
Let's go.
let's go. Welcome to the Minvo Procast. I am your host, Mark Ronick, and here with me, Nick Nalback, my co-host, partner in crime. And Nick and I, before we introduce our guest officially, Nick and I had the pleasure to finally meet each other face to face. We've known each other for a couple of years now. We've worked together closely for almost as long as we've known each other, and it's always been via internet. So
I gotta say, I'm shocked. I had no idea. That is amazing.
yeah, never have, Michael. And yeah, it not only that, but we got to meet all of our internet friends, or at least a lot of them, over the weekend, because we hosted, Nick and I, along with a handful of other people, put on a podcasting conference called Empowered Podcasting. We held it in Charlotte. It was a huge success, and really, if everything else had gone wrong, as long as I would still be happy because I got to hang with Nick in person, got to meet his family, got to meet, like I said, our other friends and their families, and lots of other cool content creators. We will be sharing a lot of stuff over the next week or two from that event to help, if you didn't make it, to help you come and see what this was all about and maybe join us next year. So with that, yes, that voice, that person you just heard from, Michael Katz. He is from Flowsend, FLOSEND.ai. That's right, Michael?
You got it.
Okay, cool. And we've gotten to know Michael a little bit over the past few months. I actually got to meet Michael face to face before I ever met Nick face to face. We were at a podcaster meetup in New Jersey, and Michael has created a very cool AI product, and Nick and I are, as we get to know it more and more, are really standing behind this thing. It's really cool, and so we figured, you know what? Let's share it with the Minvo community as well. So, Michael, welcome. Good afternoon. How are things?
Things are great. It's good to be here. It's a beautiful day, and I'm just happy to be here with the Minvo community.
Yeah, right on. So, why don't we kick things off with why you started Flowsend? What was the catalyst? What was the reason for getting this kind of thing up and running? And then we can talk a little bit about the details of what it's all about.
Yeah, sure. It's funny. I'd say building a business to kind of scratch your own itch is maybe the best and worst thing you could do, right? Where it's, is the problem too specific to you, or is it actually something everyone has? And, I, like maybe some of the folks listening today, I'm a software entrepreneur by trade, or just entrepreneur in general. The reason I started Flowsend was I was building a company in a totally different space, and I wanted to build an online presence for me and for the business. And I think, as everyone here knows, there's different ways of going about that. And I thought, yeah, one way I could do that, I could vlog, I could live stream, I could podcast, I could write. And I said, you know what, I think podcasting could be a really interesting content engine, especially like video podcasting. And I found myself in that dark tunnel of perfectionism that I think a lot of people have, where I was trying to get the most out of it and make it really good in the least amount of time possible because I had a billion other tasks to attend to. Mm-hmm. But what I really wanted was to kind of realize this vision. I wanted this content to grow. I wanted it to be a content engine across platforms to maximize my reach, maximize my authority. I actually didn't even care if I had 1 million listeners. I just knew that this would really help me build the business and help me find my niche. And I think it was really hard to do. It's what I discovered very quickly. It's hard to automate that work. And I looked at a bunch of tools out there, and for me, they were lacking in certain ways in terms of capturing my voice and the way I write things and customizability of the kinds of content I wanted to put out there and growth best practices. So I really ultimately started it to just scratch an itch that I had, and I said, I think we can do better, and here we are today.
That's awesome. And, like many other entrepreneurs, it's usually a problem of our own that we're looking to solve, and then we put it out there and learn that lots of people are looking to solve that problem too. So very cool story. And when you mentioned, and we'll dig into all of this, but it's safe to say this is a an all-in-one tool mainly focused around your post-production, right? As far as whether it's a podcast, a video, whatever it is, it's helping you with those steps after the production of the video or audio. It's helping you with other stuff like show notes, transcripts, etc., right?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. We actually have an internal tool for podcast pre-production, if you can imagine, for interviews. We maybe will release it one day. It's kind of like not customer ready, but I do use that. But yeah, this is everything in post-production and marketing. And I think the reason for that is it's really, really hard to automate creating great content in the first place. Right? Creating a great podcast, creating a great YouTube video, creating a great course. What's really hard about the modern internet is you're expected to kind of plaster this everywhere and give people a lot of ways to consume what you've done. And so we wanted to kind of take that away, both from like a production side of how do I release this in a way that's optimized for growth and that saves me time. And then after that, how do I spit other assets out that help get me a lot more reach and utility through this thing and growth. And I think Minvo obviously is one way of doing that from like a video clipping perspective. And we kind of wanted to look at a lot of the rest of the market around, optimizing your titles and captions and building blogs for SEO and building own channels and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, very cool. So, and you mentioned you were struggling with using AI and having it write in your specific voice. And I'm curious, does the user of FlowSend have that ability as well? Are they able to tweak it to learn and write in their voice?
Yeah, that's kind of what we wanted to do out of the box, right? And I'd say like we need to provide something that's good enough for anyone who can just step up to the plate and use it without any training and expertise. As you know, Mark, I know we've talked before, there's certain ways of training different AIs and custom GPTs to go write like you. Number one, it's a little bit complicated for most people. Number two, it's got its own challenges to it. And there are ways to kind of technically build on top of that in ways that like abstract away the complexity for the user and make it really, really easy to kind of choose your voice. And it's funny, we have some people who are using us not only to emulate themselves, but to emulate other people. So here's a bunch of examples of tweets or LinkedIn posts or titles or something else that I like that other people have done that I think have worked really well. I want to imitate those. So, it's funny around voice. It's like choose your adventure a little bit.
Yeah.
What I like, and I've been talking, I feel like about this in general for a long time now, but what I like about FlowSend and Minvo and kind of using them as like a combination for your post-production is that the best way to get your podcast or your content out there is to be marketing and promoting it. And I feel like that is where majority of creators just in general don't do the best job, because you're spending so much time actually creating the content itself that you don't really have any time to push the content out. And if we know anything about business, 20% of the business is your product, is your service. The other 80% is actually marketing and sales and getting people to your content in this case. And using tools like Minvo and FlowSend, it gives you some of that time. It's almost like you're buying more time to actually market the content and grow your show. And that's what I love about it so much, because it's, I think, a huge missed opportunity for a lot of creators.
Oh, and it's sad. It's kind of like, again, I liken it to like a term paper. It's like you do it and you never want to see it again, usually, if you release a video. But the work has only just started, unfortunately. And there's maybe 50 of the same podcast episode or YouTube video out on the internet right now that are mostly the same, not to be like too painting with a broad brush. And a few of them have succeeded. Well, it's not magic. There's other things that you can do to increase your odds. And I think we need to make it easier for people to do that, to kind of really emerge in that sea of content and the noise.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so Michael, I don't know how familiar you are with Riverside. And the reason why I'm asking that, well, first of all, so people know, yes, we're using Riverside to stream this, and I would love for you to share your screen and take us through FlowSend so that our audience can get a good feel for it.
For sure. I am a Riverside user as well.
Okay,
so
good. Okay.
Very familiar in general, although I rarely share my screen on here. So let's go do that really quickly.
Okay, so while Michael's doing that, I realized that I never even let Nick respond to the fact that we met face to face. I just kind of blew by it. So Nick, if you want to add anything, by all means, go for it, and then we'll take a look at what Michael's got.
Yeah, it's kind of funny and weird because we're really not that far away from each other. Like, we're a handful of hours away.
Yeah.
You being in North Carolina, me in West Virginia, and this being the first time. But it kind of made it cool because it was like an event that we were a part of putting together, and that kind of is our first inaugural event, but inaugural like meeting together.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a cool way to have it be the first time for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And I think I won the prize for making your daughter smile the most.
You definitely did.
Okay.
That's huge.
Jackie at the beginning, another member of our Empowered Podcasting community. I thought she was going to be the favorite, but we had some people that scared her off, and you came in and saved the day.
Yes, yes, that's one of my superpowers that I'm very proud of. It took a little bit to crack that nut, but I did it. All right, Michael, back to you if you don't mind. Yeah, let's tell us what we're looking at here, and let's dig into FlowSend.
Yeah, so just to like start off at the top, I'm going to show something primarily around like a podcast use case. I know that the Minvo community has so many different types of content creators, and we continue to build templates for all those different use cases. But I think it's just an easy one to kind of understand a little bit about, you know, what it is that we do and what might like a standard template look like, and then show you some of the interesting custom stuff that you can do in the platform. You know, what you're looking at right now, and I don't want to take you through the boring yet pretty simple details around uploading into the platform. Okay, so first you got to put some content up in here, and the platform, what it'll do is transcribe that content, right? So you can take a look at that in general, and then you label the speakers, and then you'll get to your content screen, right? And this probably takes, all in all, I don't know, 2 minutes tops. That's what I would say generally for this kind of process. So what you want to do is generate a really high quality transcription first and foremost, make any corrections as you need or any preferences, then you're ready to go create some content. So what I've put in here is, I'm actually not a listener myself, but I'm very familiar with the Diary of a CEO podcast, very popular podcast. And I put this in here just to kind of show in case anyone listens. And I've put that in, it's generated a transcript for me. And first it's going to do is generate, right, we'll look at this kind of like suite of content, right? It's like a full suite of content. This is all generated all at one time, right? So you don't have to think about like asking chat for this and that and these different components. We're just going to generate that for you, and you'll have kind of like your template, almost like a checklist is how I think about it. And the first thing we'll look at here is titles, right? And so I get to, you know, see here's a bunch of titles I can use. And kind of as we already talked about, I'll just kind of jump right to it. One thing that was really important to us, and we have different even like enterprise levels of this, is examples. So how do we add in examples of what we want to emulate? Now I've put in a few here of Diary of a CEO titles, how they do it stylistically, punctuation, what's their tone, right? It's a little bit hyperbolic, I don't know, do not marry them, that kind of stuff. And so what we want to do is be able to kind of emulate that. And what happens is the platform starts to learn a little bit about what you need, what kinds of things that you want to go publish. What a large brand needs is very different from what an individual creator who's looking for something a little more clickbaity might need. And what I can do also, and we'll see the kind of differences and use case of this later, is for each output, I can actually chat with it and give it feedback on what I want more of. So if I want to say, you know, make it even more clickbaity and crazy, I can do that. Or, you know, make sure you use these words or format it this way. It's really simple and straightforward. I get to look at my full history. Go ahead, Nick.
Oh, I was just gonna say, can you show an example of that? Because the history thing is pretty awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Let's see. I just said make it more clickbaity for that reason. And we'll see here. Hopefully my internet doesn't act up in this room, which it tends to. And shoot, I just realized my computer might not be charging. Okay, here we go. So what I see here is Shahrazadi reveals the shocking truth about diets and addiction. Binge eating transformed her life, so on and so forth. So like I said, it's basically transferring that. I can look at the history of that. I can kind of merge the best of, right? But this allows me to be super, super tailored about my outputs. And actually the way that a lot of our users have expressed it to me is it's kind of like speed editing, because I can edit actually in line if I want to, like a Google Doc or whatever it is, a Word doc. But this is like, I want to get to the best version of this really quickly that I want. And sorry, I'm actually asking someone if I can get a computer charger real quick. That's going to
okay.
be a bad situation.
While you're doing that, let me ask you, because I don't know that I've asked you this before about FlowSend. So, you're giving it additional information, things that you're interested in, or, you'd rather it be more clickbaity, et cetera. Is it only remembering that for this particular episode that you're working on, or is it actually storing and learning more about what kind of things you like when it comes to titles, descriptions, etc.?
So we are storing the different kind of like iterations you have in the platform. We haven't deployed the feature yet, basically to go iterate on that in the future. What we are adding in, even in the short term, is basically the ability to add additional context to like your output prompt. Even within that, so when you do see something you like, because the hardest part about learning, quote unquote, right, is you don't necessarily know what someone uses at the end of the day, and so you got to build that feedback loop in as to like, oh, was it actually better than what they did before? And so we're constantly trying to get better on that front as well, of saying, how do we make this like drop dead simple and ingest even more examples? And so for some of our like enterprise clients, we've done a lot of that work of like really going deep, but then for kind of the average FlowSend user, they get to go tailor that on their own. And I'll show you some more ways to go do that. Go ahead.
I even see like, okay, you're going in there and you're saying you want it more clickbaity, and then it gives you some more examples. And like you said, you can mix and match, kind of build out your own like Frankenstein title, but then you can go grab that and throw that into the examples. So as you're using the tool, you're actually feeding it more examples, and then you are teaching it as you go. And those, when you give it those examples, that would apply against every episode in your project. So it wouldn't maybe learn on its own, but you can constantly be teaching it as you go.
Well, you have to give it feedback. And I think you're right. And like even anyone who's used any AI tools before knows sometimes you get the iteration and it's not exactly what you wanted, really. You're like, and you kind of got to say, hey, this is what I ended up doing. When you just export it out and just do it on your own, it's kind of like, it doesn't know what you did at the end of the day. And I think that's true for everybody. So I think, Nick, you make a great point there of how to kind of iterate on that and learn over time. And we see people just like, their imagination and appetite begins to grow as they use the platform, right?
It's funny you say that, because I've caught myself, and I wasn't even thinking about it from that aspect of like teaching the AI, but I know I've had conversations with like ChatGPT where I'm like, give me a title for this. And then it spits out titles, and I'm like, give me more. And then it spits out titles, and finally I come up with something that's not even on the list, but I'm like, this sounds way better. And then I give it the title. I'm like, okay, this is what I went with. Now help me do this. And then I just keep building off the conversation. But yeah, you're furthering the AI so it better understands what you're after and what you're looking for. Yeah, that's cool.
100%. And the hard part about like an ongoing chat of it all is it's like really messy, and we're trying to almost keep it like scoped of like, here's this like template checklist of these different outputs you have that you build over time. So, what we want to do is say, I have all these, things I got to do, a checklist of things I got to do to market and produce this content. How do we reduce that from a lot of steps to very little? Because we basically taught it over time to understand me and what I need. So.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah. So, right, I'll come down here and look at other types of outputs. I get my episode description. In this case, like I said, it's a podcast. I have timestamps. I think anyone who YouTubes maybe knows how important timestamps are for YouTube growth, not only for navigability, but from our understanding, talking to a lot of people on the back end, your videos become preferred in a lot of ways when they have that. It's a lot richer of a description. It's a better audience experience. We've tried to really kind of nail the timestamps aspect of it and make it really customizable. And just like the other ones, right, I'm chatting with it and saying, I want more or less, or I want it to be like that. And there's different best practices, of course, around that.
And those time codes now even more important for podcasters as well, even those who are using, say, Apple and Spotify, et cetera, because, for example, Spotify, if it can see those time codes in your show notes, they are clickable. So somebody could, just like YouTube, so somebody could click on a certain time code and jump right to that particular section if they're interested in just hearing that at the moment.
It's so much a better experience. And to your point, we're seeing it, the timestamps being adopted by all the different platforms right now around chapters. And so, yeah, I have that. I have my like show notes in this case, and honestly, I use this in a lot of ways to go back and analyze what I did there and what I want to talk about and think about. So it's not just for outward facing. It's something you can post, but it's also something you can. Yeah, right. It says it introduces Airbnb as a sponsor, so I try to isolate your sponsors and references too.
So that output that you just showed us, are those the show notes for this particular episode?
Exactly.
And can they be formatted in different ways?
Just like everything else, exactly.
Okay, cool.
So I can
Cool.
totally change up how I want to do things. And again, we want to be like best in class for the average user, or someone who's like, I don't want to think about it. And we want to be able to be customizable for someone who says, I have an opinion. And here's how I think it's best done. And we'll give more options over time, of course, around that. Now, I think like Minvo folks on this side, we're not generating video clips, but we are generating different kinds of quotes and timestamps and places you might want to look. A lot of people, put these into Canva graphics in a lot of cases to just show that. They put it on their website. They put it, in show notes where they're like, I actually really want to put that there and highlight the best of, use it in post, etc. So we still want to give people the ability to almost like navigate the episode and ingest some highlights.
Cool.
And this plays in really well with Minvo. And actually, the first time you were showing me this, I was thinking about this in Minvo, because with Minvo, yes, it gives you all of the AI clips, like it generates them all for you, but then you have the ability to go to the full transcript of that video, and you can isolate and say, I want to take this specific piece and I want to create a clip out of that. So now Minvo gives you a bunch of clips that you can use, but then you could come over here into FlowSend, and now you have, I don't know, what do you got, 10, 12 different clips there that you could potentially extract out of Minvo on your own.
I had more before, and I changed. Yeah, exactly. But 100%, exactly.
That I really like that, because AI is great, but I find a lot of times, and this has been across like all of them, like they pull some clips that are really good, some that are just like, I probably wouldn't use it. And then you're still like, okay, but this is a 40-minute episode. I know that there was more great content in here that I could pull out. And now it's just another kind of like touch point to help you kind of get to that point faster.
Absolutely. And I could even give a feedback of like, I wanted about this topic or this specific kind of like theme. And then I get to know where I can navigate to your point on to clip it myself. And that's the beautiful interaction between those, right? So that's the clipping aspect. Now I'll go in here. I have like SEO keywords. People put this on their blogs. And people put this on their, use these as hashtags a lot of times. We've seen on YouTube videos at the bottom. So that's a pretty common use case here. And I could say like, format as hashtags, right? Instead. And, it'll format as hashtags, right? And I get that history. So I have different kind of formats. Now, right, as you see, just put them into hashtags. And I get the history, so I can do both formats. And I'll show you other ways to kind of customize this output. But again, we want to make it like, this should be, if you want this to be a 5-minute process, this can be 5 minutes, right? And not that everyone should do that. People want to spend more time in here once they realize the growth possibilities, but can it kind of cater to you? I have here, right, a LinkedIn episode post. We want to make these high quality, not just like super AI sounding, AI generated. I think there's so much of that going on. If you plug something into ChatGPT without a lot of knowledge and context, you'll get something really just sounds robotic. I think we've all seen what those look like. This should sound natural, right? Now I want to talk about something really quickly around newsletters and why I am a huge believer in newsletters. The internet today is really challenging and dispersed. And you have your like rented audiences on social media. Yeah, you can pay for audiences, but I think fundamentally where the real power is in building owned audiences. And Mark and Nick really understand that and are obviously community builders on their side, and know how powerful it can be to get feedback from communities and also engage them in really personal ways. And so one of those ways to do that, of course, is a newsletter, building your own email list. And if you're a podcaster especially, you have so little visibility into who's listening to your stuff. It's really pretty rough. And so being able to plug a newsletter and generating a newsletter content kind of in your voice out of the box from your episodes gives you another way to inform people about what you're doing, but also gives you a channel to start engaging people both for that and in other ways. And I'll show kind of one other version of that, but it's just like a really, really important thing. And for me, it's just one of many things I just talked about. But I just wanted to give it its own light for a moment because of how important I think it is.
Yeah, we fully agree. We do one for Minvo. We do one for Next Gen Podcaster. I do one for Ironic Media. It's so important because you just never know, right? The platform could just go away one day. It could just all of a sudden decide that it's going to remove you from their platform, which I know people that's happened. They've been banned for no reason whatsoever. There's all sorts of reasons. Nick just raised his hand. Yeah, but that's the thing, is that you want to find other ways to stay connected with your community, and a newsletter is an awesome way to do it, especially because for the most part, your audience is opting into that newsletter. So they are engaged users of that newsletter, and that's what it's all about.
And ROI on email is so much better than any other platform. Like if we want to start talking money, like people make money off of emails and they make pennies off of social media and all the other social channels. I feel like we could have a whole nother conversation just on newsletters.
It's pretty funny. Like, not that, I think it's hard for a lot of people doing content to become sponsored. Goes without saying, right? It's hard. Like, you get into the podcasting world, you got to have X amount of views. You go into the YouTube world where you can do the algorithmic components, and then some people have their sponsors, and YouTube makes it a little bit easier. But you want to be able to pitch people on what the ROI they're going to get out of you is. And the other thing about audio, promo codes are kind of hard to deploy. I'll just be honest. Like, I got to remember what the promo code was again, and I got to go to the internet, and it's like, wait, what? Whereas if you talk about email, you're like, oh yeah, it's literally in the email. I can click the link. And so when you talk to folks who you want to sponsor you, it's really an important kind of like metric to talk about the impressions there, because they're going to convert at a higher rate than typically people will look at.
Yeah, and people will maybe argue that and say, yeah, but if they see that video where I'm giving the promo code on Instagram, they can still save it and go back to it. And I would challenge that and say, you as a user and you as somebody who maybe saves content, the real question is, do you actually go back and look at those saves? Because I know me and several others will hit save and then never go back to it, never go find it, never, even if we've saved it and knew we saved it, we forget that we saved it for some reason.
Do you have any idea how many collections I have in Instagram?
Me too.
I started scrolling back through. I was like, oh yeah, I put some pretty cool stuff in there.
Not only
but I've never gone back and looked at it.
Not only do I have collections, I noticed when I was going through mine recently, I have duplicate collections because I didn't realize I made it once before, and then I started a new one, and so I've got multiple places to find different pieces of content. Instagram
releases their like collections AI in a few years and is like, hey Nick, is that mattress you wanted to buy 6 years ago or whatever? I'm over that at this point.
I mean, they need to come out with that now, because I feel like there's a lot of gold that I have saved in there that I'm not going to go looking for.
Right.
Release the files. But yeah, I agree. So it's a really funny thing. You're totally right. Where it's like, social media is brilliant for like brand building and like awareness building on some level. But it takes, as the thesis around Minvo is, it takes so many kind of like shots at someone to get them to engage sometimes, as they might have seen 20 of your videos and finally they're like, oh, now I'm kind of curious about this underlying person or content. It takes that sometimes. And so how do you make it so that there's something easy to convert to before that, in a way where they can stay abreast of your content and you own a channel with them? It's a lot less noisy. That's what I'd
Absolutely.
say. So yeah, I wanted to shout that out. And of course, like another thing you can kind of customize there. Now we generate a blog as well. And you might say, why is a blog important? I don't have a blog today, or I do a blog sometimes and I do some thought leadership. A lot of people view it as like, oh yeah, just a little episode summary. And the whole thing here, and this is actually true for transcripts too, is contrary to popular opinion right now or FUD, SEO is not dead right now. It's actually pretty important still in a lot of ways. And when you think about what's going to even power like chats, what do you think is powering chats? Content that ranks, right? Content that's determined is trusted in ranking. And so how do you continue to kind of rank on those areas on your own channels? Again, that's another special thing where you publish stuff. So not everyone who uses the platform uses everything we generate. And you can even toggle off things in your template if you're like, I don't really want that. I'm not going to use that right now. Customizable. But for those who are ambitious, we want to make it able to be done in minutes. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that does.
The fact that you can do all this so quickly, and the point that you made about it being important to have things like blog posts and all that, I agree 100%, because you have, as the creator, I'm talking to you guys tuning in and listening, you guys have content that can help people. You can have content, let's say 10 people, and I'm just using random numbers. There are 10 people that really want your content, but only 2 of them listen to podcasts. 4 of them watch YouTube videos, and the remaining only consume content through blog posts. But if you're only doing podcast content or you're only doing video content, you're only going to reach the people who consume that. Even though they want your content, they need it, and they're just not going to consume it that way. So using tools like this to where the blog post can be automatically generated from the content you created, it allows you to provide that information and the things your audience needs in the way that they want to consume it. So you're not limiting yourself to only podcast listeners. And that's really what I think is powerful about a lot of these AI tools, because before you really only had the bandwidth to put a solid effort into one channel. Now you can hit all of them in essentially one shot.
Yeah. Well, and I think, like I think I mentioned last time, like I had my first child last year, and I don't have time to listen to every single episode of every podcast that I love or every YouTube that I love. It's ambient sometimes I don't. I need other ways to consume it sometimes to stay abreast, or like I want to know what happened here, but I just know I won't have the time this week. And then sometimes it piques my curiosity just enough that I end up converting to it anyways. And so how do you give people more ways to engage with your content in the first place, as Nick mentioned, around like the channels people operate in or like to do? I know personally, I'm on like LinkedIn a lot. I'm like, I like to see the text post actually quite a bit, because I'm like, I want to be able to just skim and ingest this really quickly. Even better if it's like a rich text post with a video, then I'm like, okay, well now I want to see the video too, and so it's really about like, how do you give people a lot of ways to engage, and if it's not easy to do, let's just be honest with ourselves, especially if this is a hobby, not your full-time job, that's going to be really hard without some tooling. You're never going to give it a chance. So yeah, I have like a Twitter thread here, and again, more and more and more. Now, I wanted to show you a couple like little things, just as like one of the things that we think is really special about our product, which is this ability to do custom outputs. And I can go in here and I can kind of go in and create my own. I can utilize one from our library, or I can just ask the question. Now, we're going to put some bumpers in to try to make your prompt, the way you're asking it, better, prompt the AI in a more effective way. I can add examples to those too. And I'll show you kind of what I did, right? And so, an example might be that we see a lot of users actually is they, and we'll make this even easier very soon, is, are you someone who posts to YouTube as well? Your like podcast description and your YouTube description actually, in a lot of ways, could and should be different, because they're different. You're optimizing for different things. You're optimizing for the YouTube algo and what they want, and you're optimizing for podcast players, which are on your phone and have certain other little restrictions on them. So how can I create a separate YouTube description that's SEO optimized? In this case, I have a podcast that has guests. And so what I want to do is I want to isolate the best pieces of advice they gave and the uncommon insights they shared. And I'm going to use these and I'm going to paste these as social posts, right? And I'm going to say, hey, look, here's what they shared. That's like really interesting authority and reach for me online. I could even put this as a video caption for a video totally unrelated to this, just to give people ways to engage with that core content in the first place, right? So it's super modular in that sense. I asked it one time to give me this. This becomes part of my template. So next time I upload content, it will automatically generate that for me. Same goes for examples. Same goes for everything here. Is we want to make it like every time you do something, you spend any time doing anything, it's something that we'll learn from, make easier. Another example.
Can it do the reverse too, where like, okay, you've got a bunch of stuff and now you've realized, you know what, I'm not going to blog anymore for whatever reason. Can you remove that from the list?
Yes, you can remove it from the list as well.
Cool.
in the project settings. And this is also like on a project by project level. And so you might have, your short form content, you might have your podcast, you might have speeches you gave, you might have courses you're doing. All of those can have different project templates. And you might want to keep some in some and take out of others. So we also and also can store different voices too. So it's like we want to make it really customizable there for people doing multiple things. In this case, right, I want to give a LinkedIn post and a Twitter post to my guest, right? So when I release the episode, everyone who podcasts or has people on videos knows how powerful it is when the other person posts it. It's like a huge recheck. I mean, times a lot. But I don't want to go compose that. I don't want to have to think about my post and their post and their other. I want to give them some options here maybe. So I can say, give me 3 options. And so I already have that set up here I recently had the pleasure of joining Steve Bartlett. This is from the perspective of the guest. And so how do you make that easy on people too? Right? It's like, again, there's endless automations here. The last thing I'll highlight here is just like, this is something we've seen from some customers recently where they want YouTube community posts. And anyone who posts to YouTube knows, hey, that's another way to foster community engagement on YouTube. So in this case, what has it generated for me? It's generated 2 different polls based on the recording, and it's generated an episode release post. So I could do 2 different ones if I want there.
That is cool.
Polls are such a good idea.
Yeah, and
That's
also
awesome.
besides YouTube communities, also a feature that you can do on Spotify for podcasters. If it's hosting your podcast, it gives you that interactive tool where you can either put up a poll or you can ask a question to your audience, and then they have a little field, a little box that they can type in and send it off. And then when you get that response, whether it's a poll or an individual answer, then the next episode you can speak to those results that you've received. So yeah, that's a great little feature. I haven't even thought about doing that, even using, just straight up through ChatGPT. So that's a really good idea.
That's what I was thinking. Like that's
Yeah.
such a simple one, and
This is why I'm here. This is why I'm here, guys.
every day when I publish the AI briefing, I'm like, I should probably come up with a question or a poll or something, and then I'm just like, I don't really want to deal with this right now. Send.
Right.
But yeah, what the heck?
That's how we all feel. We all feel like, I don't want to do this right now. I know it's like
Right.
quote unquote important or like could be, but like I don't even have the time to try it for the first time or try it 5 times. But yeah, like I think it's funny. People talk about community a lot. The word community is such an operative term right now. And I'm like, okay, people think about that as like a Discord chat. And that's like one way that we think about communities. It's one way a community is built. Sometimes a community can happen between one person, between a creator and everyone who listens, in a way that it doesn't exactly look like that. And I think like a poll is a great example of that. It sounds really stupid and simple, but it's just another way to kind of gauge your audience, and they feel like they're a part of your content process too. They were a part of whatever you just did. You could even ask for feedback, right? Of what was your favorite part of this kind of episode? Do you know what I mean? That's super customizable too. And it's like, that helps me refine my own content algorithm of what I'm going to do next. It's just another, again, I put that under the community bucket because it's that like parasocial relationship too. And, of course, in these ones, you can get people commenting on it as well, and they could, sound off in the chat, quote unquote, between other people.
Right. Yeah, that's a great way to use it as well. That's cool.
So yeah, look, I could show you a lot of other like features here and there in terms of admin and how you do different things, but I think that's just like the general 411 on what do we do, how do we help people, how are we kind of iterating on the platform over time. And you'll see here I have other folders where I'm doing different podcasts or different kinds of assets, right? Like a lot of folks are using us for webinars and live streams too, of how do we repurpose those into interesting content for demand generation for their businesses, and email campaigns, email sequences, right? I mean, Nick, you talked about it. I'm like, how do I get an email course out of my 3 podcasts? Or, these are all different like automations that can be built in, and that like custom output component is where that really goes to shine of like, okay, you finished the basic stuff. Now what do I want to go do? And we're happy to also help people with that on a custom basis of like brainstorming. Hey, what would be effective for the kinds of stuff the kind of content you're producing?
So cool. I love it. And I just love all of the attention to details that FlowSend has included in this product. Just you guys are really thinking like the creator and catering to the creator. So thank you for doing that. And yeah, this is really exciting. Before I ask one more question, Nick, did you have anything else you wanted to ask, or you good?
No, this conversation, Michael, you've been bringing the gems today. You've got my mind thinking so much about all these different things that I want to do, should be doing, can be doing now. And the one thing that I will add, because this just struck me as we were talking, with AI, there's so much stuff that we can do, and obviously FlowSend can handle a lot of the stuff that we would typically turn to ChatGPT for. But as you are going through your production processes, think about, like, anytime you come to that moment, you're like, I just don't want to do this. Like, anytime you're like, I wish there was an easier way. I wish I could do this quicker or better or whatever. Stop and write it down, because in this case, like, you could just create another output that your episode automatically, or that FlowSend automatically generates for your episode. It's something I know I haven't been doing lately, but need to do a better job of. Is like, anytime I catch myself saying this sucks, now we potentially
It's
have
a good
solutions.
life skill. It's a good
It is.
life thing to be like, how do I not do the annoying thing a million times? And maybe like 5 years ago, you would have been like, I don't know, I'll do this whole like SOP process. Now it's like, okay, now I can actually think about that in a way where someone could do it for me, potentially. And even with, Nick, you mentioned ChatGPT. To clarify for folks watching, we operate on multiple models. We are not focused on, cutting you short there, and we want to choose the best models for you. So for a lot of our out-of-the-box outputs, we've chosen which model we've seen performance on, and we're constantly monitoring that. We're handling kind of the prompt engineering aspect of it. So it's like, I think you're totally right, which is, look, anything is better than nothing. But also, how do we also like handle that from a user? Because I'm sure you hear a lot from your friends, or, oh, I've had a lot of success with this one, or, I use Gemini for this, and I use Chat. And it's like, okay, let's stop with that. Like, how do we just use something, and, we try to at least handle some of that. But you're totally right, Nick. It's like, everything becomes so annoying, and you're like, my ideas are running, and I'm like, the ideas running is only productive if you can do something about it.
Absolutely. And this is a big reason why we have been sharing FlowSend with all the different communities that we're a part of, is because if you followed Nick and I for any period of time, you've probably heard us talking about the fact that we don't usually like the all-in-one solutions, because they don't feel very flexible. You have to take what you can get. And that includes one of my favorite podcast platforms, like Buzzsprout, for example. They do some of that automation for you, and you can't do anything else with it. Once it gives it to you, that's what you're stuck with. And that's what I love about FlowSend, is that like you said, it's really, it has that flexibility to be able to go back and say, that didn't work, I want you to do it this way instead. And then it learns that as well. So yeah, that's why we love promoting FlowSend.
I appreciate it, Mark. And exactly, like, I feel like I get caught up saying, oh, we can do everything for everybody. We have all these different use cases, but I think the reality is we're not for everyone. Like, full stop, we're not for everyone. And this is not in like a sort of demeaning way, but it's like, if you just need literally anything basic, and it can be fine or crappy or average or mediocre, I don't know, and you're using something and you find it okay and you're not annoyed at all, you don't need to try us. You don't need to. You can. I'm not going to try to convince you to switch. But if you are someone who's like serious about content in that way and serious about that kind of growth, well, then we're worth a try. Probably. And not everyone is going to leverage all of our differentiated features. That's just the reality. We have to be depressed about ourselves. But like, I don't know. You can't beat everyone.
Yeah. And Michael, do you happen to have any gifts for our audience today? Do you happen to have any way that they could try this, maybe at a discounted rate or what have you? Anything like that for our community?
I do. I actually created a link right before this. If you do go to, I'd say we'll have it live in maybe an hour from now. If you go to minvo.flowsend.ai, we'll be able to kind of mark you there. Just pretty simple. Take that down. And we'll mark you and give you a free month of our service.
Awesome. So there you go. Free month trial within an hour or so. You'll be able to try FlowSend for free. And we want to hear about it. So if you are a Minvo community member and you're using Discord, That's the place we want to hear from you. Go to our Discord. Leave us some feedback if you're trying out FlowSend. Let us know what you think. We'll pass it on to Michael. And I know, Michael, you're very open to receiving feedback as well.
I love it. I'd rather people complain all day than not care. So,
Well, and to be clear, I didn't say just to complain. I said feedback. So even if you're enjoying it, let's hear that too.
sure. That's our favorite part. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Michael, thank you for joining Nick and I again on a different platform this time. We appreciate it. We're excited about this relationship that's grown with you, and we're excited about FlowSend and hope that our community is too. So thank you again so much for doing this.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Thanks,
take
Michael.
care. And we're back again next Tuesday. That would be the 9th, I believe, at 12 p.m. Eastern. Nick and I are going to discuss some of the newest features available on Minvo and how to use them, how to navigate them, how to take advantage of them. And we may have a special guest joining us as well. So we'll publish the details of that upcoming live stream here in the next couple days. And in the meantime, if you are in the United States, enjoy your 4th of July holiday, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Make it a great day, everybody. Take care.
See you guys.